Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. Tonight, a rural part of Lakeshore is rallying for a nurse practitioner. Plus, the new Aero car on full display. It rolls into Windsor, and parts suppliers say it is delivering on its promise. CBC News goes inside a fundamentalist Christian movement that wants to remake Canadian politics, and part of the push includes a conference here in Windsor. And officials saying it will be a grim wildfire season this summer. A look at how the fires across the country are impacting our city. A walk-in clinic and pharmacy in Stony Point is fighting to get a nurse practitioner on site. Officials say seniors in that rural part of Lakeshore are not getting the health services they need, and the need is great.
I hope we do get a doctor or a nurse practitioner, and it'd be better for the whole community.
Stony Point resident Yvonne Picard hasn't had a family doctor for 4 years since her doctor retired. She didn't want to have to travel for a new one, so she goes to the Health Point walk-in clinic and pharmacy instead.
I come every 3 months for my blood pressure check and prescription refills, and whenever I need a cold or if I don't feel well, I'm here.
Many in this community don't have primary care anymore, or their doctors are now far from home, like Brian and Taya.
There's a lot of people that suffer from type 2 diabetes, and I'm one of them. So when you have, and you're taking medication and you want to keep up on all the visits, and a lot of times you just don't do the visits because, well, in my case, he's in Amherstburg now.
There is a big gap in this area.
Mina Safin is the pharmacist at Health Point, where they offer a walk-in telehealth clinic. They have internationally trained providers on site, supervised by a doctor in Toronto. Over the years, though, once they've gotten their licenses in Canada, they've left for bigger cities. Safin says a full-time provider is needed on site, especially with the community's aging population.
Driving in snow, driving in wintertime, it's more difficult. Another thing, like I met few seniors people, they don't have physical exam for years. So this age need more care.
He reached out to the Lakeshore Community Nurse Practitioner-led clinic for help. Kate Bolahan is the lead nurse practitioner there. Nurse practitioners are registered nurses who have additional training to diagnose and treat illnesses, prescribe medications, and do other tasks similar to a doctor.
We are at capacity. So if we had more now, then I would be able to come here, set up, and serve the population. Unfortunately, I don't have that ability.
The province recently started accepting proposals to expand primary care teams. Bolahan is applying for 4 more nurse practitioners, and if successful, they'll set someone up at Stony Point.
I am very hopeful. Our team is very hopeful. People that have healthcare providers fare better. Their health is better.
I think that we're nicely positioned with facilities that are set up, ready to go. Nurse practitioner-led clinic in the heart of Lakeshore already, so expansion just makes so much sense.
Paul Crack has lived in Stony Point his whole life and wants more for his hometown.
I went through aging with my parents, and I saw what it did to them, right? Proud, hardworking people. And things change, and we feel we can conquer the world, but we start fading. So we need the help now.
We need it. We need it in this community. It's just a matter of importance.
Here's how this application to the province actually works. It is an open call for funding through the Ministry of Health. Teams submit expressions of interest, and then the government decides to expand existing teams and or create up to 18 new teams in communities that need the care. Applications are due by June 16th, and Bolahan says she's hopeful for a decision by the fall. The federal government will provide emergency funding for Pride festivals as they face increasing costs to security.
There's always backlash from people that assume that because we're moving toward a more inclusive society, that somehow it's about their rights. Somehow it's about their rights being infringed. And as many activists have said before, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And that brings us why we're all here today, to make it absolutely crystal clear that our government will not stand by while hate and violence seek to reverse decades of progress.
The government will invest $1.5 million to Fierté Canada Pride to help offset additional security costs for festivals all across the country. Officials say the investment was made to help protect members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community from rising attacks. And CBC News has obtained internal documents from a Christian advocacy group that show a plan to spark a nationwide political movement to limit LGBTQ rights. That movement has a foothold here in Windsor. The document was shared amongst hundreds of people at a religious conference at Harvest Bible Church. The CBC's Jonathan Montpetit was in attendance.
Yeah, so this conference was held at Harvest Windsor Church in Windsor. And at this conference, this Christian advocacy group called Liberty Coalition Canada, well, they were handing out this document. And as you can see at the top, it says, please keep classified. Now, this document lays out a plan to raise several $100,000 to help train Christians to run for political office at all levels of government. The document also says that Liberty Coalition Canada helped more than 100 candidates run in school board and municipal elections held last year. And in a lot of these campaigns, the candidates were focused on gender and sexuality issues. The ultimate goal, according to the document, is causing, quote, the most powerful political disruption in Canadian history. This movement, basically a network of churches and pastors that really came together in their opposition to public health measures during the height of the pandemic. So several of these pastors got together. They drafted something called the Niagara Declaration in the fall of 2020. Now, this Niagara Declaration kind of lays out their opposition to what they see as state interference in the business of the church. Several hundred churches across the country ended up signing the Niagara Declaration. And from there, Liberty Coalition Canada was formed. Now, more recently, this movement has really focused its attention on the LGBTQ community. A few pastors have organized anti-drag protests. These pastors often make anti-trans comments in public, and they're raising money to fight these issues in the courts. So I had the chance to exchange voice memos with Pastor Aaron Rock. Now, he's the lead pastor at Harvest Windsor Church. He helped write the Niagara Declaration, and he believes that Christian values really form the basis of Western civilization, and in Canada in particular. Now, with legalization of abortion, same-sex marriage, advances in trans rights, he sees these Christian values as being under threat, and they need to be protected. And in particular, he sees the Bible as he wants to see the Bible become the ultimate authority, the ultimate guidebook for answering social policy questions, especially when it comes to issues around gender and sexuality.
That was the CBC's Jonathan Montpetit. Touchdown for Project Arrow. The new prototype rolled into Windsor today, and this vehicle shows off what Canadian companies can do as we shift to electric vehicles. And as Del Molnar reports, for some suppliers, this project is paying off.
The Arrow rolled into the Invest Windsor Essex Automobility and Innovation Centre for the first time since it was conceived here more than 2 years ago. About 20 local companies were among the 58 in Canada that took part in the project to showcase what they can supply to automakers. The car started a road show at the Las Vegas Consumer Electronics Show in January, and since then the president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association says it has been successful in attracting the attention of the automakers called OEMs.
There are at least 20 companies here that are talking to OEMs for the first time. Those are the applied technology companies. And they are concentrated here in this region, also around the KW, and then several just north of GTA. Those are new jobs footprints. If I had to take a guess at it, that you were going to hold me to it, probably be a few thousand jobs.
In fact, I'd like to say we just closed our first deal to design a similar next generation cockpit for prototyping of these next generation AI solutions in the car. And we did that in Japan. Basically, it'll know who you are, it will recognize you. It will then select your driving preferences.
Ron DiCarlo would like to see more decision-making by automakers happen here too. Other suppliers say the Arrow project is helping them increase business.
Business development is a long-term process, and so we're actually making really good headway in having some conversations around how some of these things will be procured.
And a local company providing seatbelts for the Arrow says it's a bit early for them to know how their participation will help them.
There are some interesting assembly techniques that are a little bit different. from what we're used to because of the way the car went together and to make it look and perform the way it does. But I think that that will be something for the future.
Volpe says all of the parts and components on the car, except for the display screens, come from Canada and can be available for the 2025 model year. It's battery powered and that part is sourced from Quebec. Taxpayers also helped get this project across the finish line. The federal government put in $8.9 million. There was $1.8 million from Ontario. The Aero will be on display at the Auto Tech show in Novi, June 7th and 8th. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Correctional Services Canada says it's reviewing its recent decision to move Paul Bernardo to a medium security prison. He has been serving a life sentence at a maximum security facility for almost 30 years. He was found guilty of kidnapping, torturing, and murdering 2 teenaged girls. The lawyer of the victim's family says they were given no warning or explanations for the transfer. Catherine Cullen has the details.
I was profoundly concerned and again shocked by this decision.
The public safety minister condemns the decision to move Paul Bernardo, but he can't change it.
It is important to underline that under the law, this is an independent decision.
On Friday, news broke that the notorious serial rapist and killer had already been transferred from this Ontario maximum security prison to a medium security one in Quebec, prompting outrage.
I fully and totally understand how shocked and appalled so many Canadians are.
Mr. Bernardo is a monster and he belongs in maximum security.
And from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, Paul Bernardo should rot in a maximum security prison for the rest of his miserable existence, full stop. The Correctional Service of Canada said in a statement the decision will now be reviewed to ensure it was appropriate, evidence-based, and more importantly, adequately considered victims.
It just brings sadness and despair and disbelief to them.
The lawyer for the families of victims, Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, say the Correctional Service won't even explain why Bernardo was moved or whether he's now in the general prison population instead of solitary confinement.
They should not be hiding behind the privacy rights of the offender, of this particular kind of offender, the worst of the worst, the most evil of evil.
I think going forward, it will be up to the Correctional Services of Canada to explain to Canadians exactly how these decisions are taken.
Mendocino says years ago Canadians were assured Bernardo would live out his days in a maximum security prison. It's not clear whether this review will send him back to one. The minister says he expects an update soon. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Let's take a live look outside there. Notice the haze? Well, it feels like it's been around for a while now, and part of the reason, those wildfires. Now, they're not close to us, but we've got them on all sides at this point. In Alberta, Quebec, Nova Scotia. Now, all of that smoke is creating some pretty wild-looking skies. So let's take a look at what's happening in Michigan. Now, this map shows the fires happening right now. It's northern Michigan that's dealing with fires. Evacuations forced people out of Grayling Township. State officials saying the state is going through unprecedented hot and dry conditions, saying they're in extreme fire danger. But it's actually not the Michigan fires bringing the haze, according to experts.
Well, it's really hazy because of the smoke that's being transported by the air, the winds, and it's really from the forest fires in Quebec. The smoke that's generated by those forest fires are now coming into Ontario, northeastern Ontario, southern and southwestern Ontario.
In one part of Quebec today, authorities urged residents to wear respirators when outside. Lauren Pelly looks at the health threat to our lungs.
The sky in Montreal looked gloomy, all thanks to smoke from more than 150 forest fires still raging elsewhere in Quebec, including Val d'Or, 500 kilometers northwest, where evacuations began over the weekend, and fumes are inescapable.
It's all over the place. You go outside, you smell it. It's even with just opening a window for a few seconds.
Across the country, multiple regions are now facing air quality statements, some far beyond the wildfire zones. In Toronto, a haze hung over the downtown core.
We know that wildfire smoke causes widespread inflammation.
This physician says it's all made up of pollutants, which can become more harmful to human health the more you're exposed.
So people who work outside, people who are experiencing homelessness and spending a lot of time outdoors, the risks to those folks will be higher.
Environment Canada says people with heart or lung disease, asthma, pregnant individuals, and both children and seniors are also at high risk, even from small amounts of smoke.
It can go all the way down into our lungs and not only cause topical irritation through all of our respiratory linings, but actually cross over into our bloodstream.
A research team studied a bad wildfire season in Canada's north and found a rise in hospital visits linked to asthma, pneumonia, and COPD.
You may want to shelter in place because you don't want to get out there and be breathing in more terrible air.
And doctors say if you have to go outside in the smog, consider wearing something you might still have at home, a well-fitting N95 mask. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Another live look out there at that haze. Your weather's coming right up. A new outlook for North America's energy system says if we have an extra hot summer, Ontario is at an elevated risk for so-called power brownouts. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has more now on what needs to be done to keep that from happening.
We haven't had a lot of scorching hot days just yet this year. But if we do, a new outlook by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation finds Ontario is at risk of brownouts.
There's a risk if conditions are very, very bad.
This professor says that would mean an extended heat wave. One reason for the elevated risk, less nuclear power available due to refurbishing. And the report says in Windsor, extra load is adding to a constrained transmission network during high demand, meaning sufficient supply could be an issue there.
The province really doesn't have a very good strategy for dealing with these kinds of critical peaks. And that's partially a function of having dismantled much of its strategy around energy efficiency.
When the Ford government first came to power, it spent hundreds of millions of dollars to cancel green energy projects.
If we run out of power this summer, if we have outages, this is on their head.
So the most immediate thing we can do right now is bring in energy efficiency, conservation, and demand management programs so we can reduce those late afternoon peaks in particular.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the Energy Ministry says the independent electricity system operator has been clear that Ontario's electricity system is prepared for this summer with adequate supply to meet electricity demand. He says they secured an extra 800 megawatts, enough to power the City of London, and also calls natural gas our insurance policy that guarantees the lights stay on and prices stay down while the nuclear reactors are being refurbished. But environmentalists and the opposition criticize the reliance on natural gas, especially on the hottest days.
That begins to erode the very significant progress we made in Ontario by phasing out coal-fired electricity. It means we're back to putting smog generators in the smog zone. So that's not good.
He says one way to manage peaks would be for systems to turn off air conditioners for 5 minutes when there's a risk, something he says people wouldn't notice. The Green Party wants more solar power, generally available on hot days. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette Kennedy joins us now for a look at weather. Now, Colette, watching that story, it really makes you think about what do we have ahead of us here in Windsor with the heat that we've got going on?
Yeah, exactly. What is the outlook? And I will tell you that, just even looking at the June outlook for central and eastern Ontario, it's that temperatures, if anything, are seasonal or a little bit below. But in southwestern Ontario, we have a few ups and downs over the next week, and then there is that potential that kind of the second half of this month, temperatures are above seasonal and in those upper 20s to approaching 30. So I'll be with you on that and watching carefully how things go. The other thing I want to show you is we're approaching the summer solstice, so the longest day of the year in terms of daylight, right? That's coming up on the 21st. So as of today, we have over 15 hours and 8 minutes of daylight and some seconds, but I didn't put those in there, and we'll be approaching 1516 coming up very shortly. And if you compare that to the winter solstice, yeah, we do a lot better in summer because, of course, when we get towards the winter solstice, we're talking about it being about 6¼ hours less daylight. I just find I can get so much more done in the summer. There's something about the daylight, it keeps your energy going, right? In the winter, in the evenings, just kind of want to hibernate. All right, let's show you what's going on here. Special air quality statement. It's not that it stretches back towards the Windsor area, but it's close by, and because of the smoke from the forest fires that we are dealing with across the country, but it keeps migrating into our skies, and we have some in the province west of Ottawa. Because of that, over the course of this week, we may see that even near surface level, we get some elevated pollution levels. So we could have some of that air quality statement come our way. And the other thing is just how dry the conditions have been. There's a cold front that's coming through, but it doesn't pack much of a punch. A little bit of shower activity here, and in eastern Ontario where it is so dry, in fact, it's some of the lightning strikes that I'm concerned about. Then just having a look at the smoke that is in the atmosphere. So we get the hazy skies even when we're supposed to have beautiful sunshine and blue skies. When it's in the upper atmosphere, it doesn't necessarily pose a problem here at the surface for breathing and respiratory issues, but look at how much has really been invading our skies. When I pull that off and we just look at the cloud cover, it's nothing like that. That is the smoke up there. All right, so we do have some extra cloud cover tonight into tomorrow morning. We'll clear that off, and then I'd say sunny conditions, but I would expect sunny to hazy conditions. The winds will be a little bit blustery from the north behind this front, and because of that, that should mix the atmosphere a little bit. These are our current temperatures in the mid-20s here. Winds are at 25 overnight tonight. We will see teens, comfortable sleeping weather in terms of what we're looking at. And then I said there's some ebbs and flows over the next week. So behind that cold front, not so much tomorrow, but it'll be breezy, and that'll knock that down. Cool a little bit, then up a little bit, and then after that, we may see some real warmth.
Thanks for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
When we come back, we'll take you to Ukraine with the latest on the war. Stay with us. Moscow claims its forces have thwarted a major Ukrainian offensive in Russian-controlled Donetsk region. Russia's military says it has killed hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers and destroyed multiple tanks and armored vehicles. Kyiv has denied carrying out any major attacks in the area, calling it Russian misinformation. But there is growing speculation about a possible Ukrainian counteroffensive to retake occupied territory. Ukraine's military even released a promotional video calling for operational secrecy. It shows armed soldiers gesturing for silence as gunfire and booms are heard in the background. And before we go, we want to tell you about an underwater robot that could soon make aquatic searches faster and easier. A Swiss company says its submersible drone can do the risky work in turbulent water, so divers don't have to.
So we focus really on the most challenging conditions. So here in Switzerland, for example, we have rivers, which are quite challenging to operate in as humans or as any other solution that's currently out on the market. So that's not really possible. So there are no solutions for high currents, if you want.
It looks like a mini submarine. Its small engine is loaded with cameras that can scan through murky water. If it finds a small object, it can retrieve it. If an object is larger, the robot can mark the spot and divers can come back later to pick it up. That is it for CBC Windsor News. For more, go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor, and you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching and have a great night.